So we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Have a roll call, please.
Chief Thornton,
Here.
Chief Pinion,
Here.
Lily Pike, Dee Dee Hayes, Jennifer Henfling,
Here.
Chief Phillips.
Here. Next on the agenda will be the approval of the January 2023 minutes. We wasn't able to have a meeting in February, so those minutes should be read, emailed out to everybody. Anybody got any questions or comments? Have a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Chief Pinion makes a motion. To have a second.
Second.
Ms. Henfling makes a second. Roll call.
Pinion,
Aye.
Pike,
Aye.
Henfling.
Aye.
We don't have any old business on the agenda. New business, we don't have anything on the agenda. Does anybody have anything for new business? Have no new business, we'll go ahead to the monthly report from Decatur Fire. Chief Phillips.
So, is this thing on? Is it working? So I'll give you 2 months since we didn't meet in February. Our January times for Decatur Fire Department, we had a 99% fractile within the city. Go ahead, start over.
Let the record show that he is arrived.
For January, Decatur Fire in the PJ had 100%. There were 293 Decatur Fire calls in the city limits and 11 in the PJ for January. February, 264 calls, with 98% of those met within the standard. In the PJ, there were 19 calls and 100% within the time standard. Moving on into the EMS coordinator's report, for January, there were 3 mechanical issues reported. Of those 3, I believe all 3 were either in responding to a call or while transporting a patient. They were all minor mechanical issues, and there were no issues associated with the patient from any of the delays. There were 2 time exemption forms turned in for January. One of those was approved, one was denied. February, we only have 1 mechanical issue reported. It wasn't, it was on a call, but there were no patient issues, no time exemptions submitted on that. The first page of your packet is we have both months broke down for you there. In January, there were 1,457 calls, 7 rolled calls, and you can see those broken down by nature code. In February, there were 1,257 calls with 1 rolled call. The last column there is just last year's numbers for your comparison. The next part in your packet is a financial penalty that was issued to Decatur Morgan for a fractile time violation in the 4th quarter. These were the quarterly report for the 4th quarter of 2023, which was October, November, and December. I'm sorry, 2022. Was submitted. It was a little bit late. Since we didn't have a meeting, it didn't really get in. There was no interference there. So Decatur Morgan's quarterly report for 2022, 4th quarter 2022, showed that they had an 88% fractile response in the PJ for 13 minutes. Only 88% of the calls were in 13 minutes. By the ordinance, that's a financial penalty of $5,000. And recommendation to the ARB that 5 points be applied to their point deficit. An appeal has been submitted,
It
correct?
was submitted yesterday, too late to get on this agenda, so we'll deal with that next week, next month.
So the motion for the penalties and all would just be applied at the appeal. There'd be no sense in applying anything. So the final sheet there that's stapled together is for your review. These are the 87 PJ calls from the fourth quarter of 2022. Of the 87 calls, 13 of those, actually 18, were not within the time standard, but because of standard practice, 5 of those were taken off, which one was PD was on scene and requested a non-emergency response. That doesn't count against a frac tile. 2 of those were considered unsafe scenes and the ambulance crew staged, waiting scene safety. Those never count. And there were 2 time exemption forms turned in, both from December 27th, which was the day that we had ice and snow conditions. Those time exemptions were approved. So of that, that put 13 calls that were out of compliance, giving them an 85% frac tile response for the fourth quarter. 74 calls out of 87 were in compliance. 4 of those calls would have put them at 89.6%, which would have made them compliant. So essentially they missed their frac tile response by 4 calls. So the top section of your sheet there are those 13 calls highlighted. The longest time was 22 minutes, and then broken down as you can see there. The next to the last column that says RSP for response time, that shows what the actual response time was to each of those calls. So.
Just you may not know this, I should have said something to you before, but just out of curiosity, you said there was 87 total calls from PJ for that quarter.
Yes.
What is our average, you know what the average quarter, amount of calls for the PJ each quarter is?
I did not pull those numbers. I did look back last year, and it did appear that these were a higher number of calls than normal. But I did not pull enough to get an average for you.
So anybody have any questions or anything about Chief Phillips' report? Thank you. Next on the agenda is Decatur Morgan's report.
So for January 2023, we had a 94% response time in the city limits. We responded to 321 calls that were the Echo, Delta, and Bravo, and we transported 225 patients from those calls. In the PJ, we had a 100% response time. There was 20 calls. We met all 20 of those within the time limit. We transported 14 of those 20 patients. We did respond outside our primary coverage area 12 times in the month of January, and we rolled 7 calls that month. We had a total of 1,428 requests for service and transported 1,179 patients in the month of January. In February, in the city limits, we had a 92% frac tile response time. We had 281 requests for service on the Echo, Delta, and Bravo calls, and we transported 216 of those patients. In the PJ, we had 100% response time. There was 25 calls, and we met all 25 of those within the response time standard, and we transported 15 of those patients. For the month of January, we responded to 1,217 calls and transported 1,053 patients. We had 1 call rolled to us from another agency, and we rolled 1 call in the month of February. And then, as it relates to the quarterly reports of the fourth quarter of 2022, in the city limits, we had a 91% frac tile response time. There was 912 requests for service. We transported 613 of those patients. And in the PJ, we had an 85% response time. There was 87 calls, and we made 74 of those. We transported 46 of those patients. We responded to a total of 4,279 calls and transported a total of 3,413 patients in the fourth quarter of 2022. In the fourth quarter, we had 24 calls rolled to us, and we rolled 20 calls for the entire quarter.
Does anybody have any questions? Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is discipline reviews for EMS penalty 230001. Chief Phillips has already told us about that penalty and what it was for. And Mr. Alexander has said that Decatur Morgan has appealed that. That has been sent into the city clerk's office, and copy should have been sent out to everybody, and that will be handled in our next ARB meeting in April. Does anybody have anything else, any presentations, anything to go over? Any questions? All right. If there is nothing else, we can be, all right, we got some.
Be out the next couple of months. You want me to put somebody in my place, or do you leave it open?
Or your designee, so.
I'll make them.
I haven't seen Arthur in a long time.
And I'm sure he will greatly appreciate it.
I was about to say, that's nice right there. That's nice.
Arthur just felt something in his neck just then when you said that. All right. All right, nobody else has anything, we'll be adjourned.